This is one of my kite templates, and I'm going to use it to show you how I have evolved my placement of battens on the back side of the sail. Normally when I put a batten on the sail, it's 0.03 inch diameter carbon fiber or a very small similar diameter split piece of bamboo. Those are the things I typically use. But you could use stirring straws or anything that's relatively lightweight and has some stiffness to it. It doesn't have to be rigid particularly, but it needs some stiffness. And the purpose of a batten is to reduce the amount of fluttering that occurs along the trailing edge of the kite. Now the fluttering is not a problem if you don't want the kite to fly slow. If your forward speed is important, then using battens to help reduce the fluttering will also give you a slight increase in forward kite speed. Now when I started making kites, I don't know, 25 years ago, I started putting battens on and followed what I saw in Indian paper bamboo fighter kite designs. And they placed their battens pretty much at a 90-degree angle from the trailing edge to the spine, about 4 or 5 inches up from the bottom or tail of the spine. So that's what I thought was probably a good place to do it. So that's what I did. And it did help. No question about it. But I later thought maybe if that batten, because these battens were only about 3.5 inches long, that it weren't a very large piece on the sail. But if I made these battens longer, they might actually do a better job. So I began experimenting with that, and I started to angle the batten differently. I would place it about the same location on the trailing edge, but I began by changing the angle up to where the bow and the spine meet. So that angle looked like this. So that was the angle that I used. Now that made the batten much longer, and it did have a greater impact. I started the batten at the point where the wingtip line crosses the spine, thinking that the sail changes shape above that line differently than it does below that line. And I thought, well, this is a good place to just add stiffness to the trailing edge. And sure enough, it did help. And having the longer batten was an improvement. So then I thought, well, maybe I should angle it towards the nose of the kite. So I made that slight adjustment, which didn't prove to be significant in terms of flight. I couldn't tell any difference. And then I began using multiple battens. They would be angled about the same, but they would be located farther along the spine, along the trailing edge. So I would have, anywhere from 3 battens on each side to 2 battens on each side. Now, the battens added a little weight to the tail portion of the kite. And I used that when I made the kite in order to help have the finished kite have a balance point, nose to tail balance point, that was located, about in here, about between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch noseward of the wingtip line spine cross point. Recently, I decided I'm going to use the point where the bow meets the leading edge of the nose area. I'm going to use that point and make a parallel line to the spine from that point to the trailing edge. So I ended up with this location as a place for a batten. And again, I went up to the wingtip line and stopped. That was too far out on the sail to really do the job, so I added a second one, also parallel to the spine, but about 1.5 inches away from the spine. And so it was like this. On each side of the kite I would have 2 battens. And that's how I make them now, and they really do the best job of reducing the flutter, making the kite fly slightly faster, and much, much more quietly.